I'm Adrian Pierma, and I'll be the moderator for this next panel and introduce myself and our concept of what we'll be talking about here as a panel while my panel gets assembled in here. I'm with the consulting firm STV. We are architects and urban planners and transportation engineers, a little more well-known on the East Coast, relatively recent in expansion out here in the West Coast. I've been working out here. I live in Portland, went to University of Washington, spent the first 10, 11 years of my career up here in Seattle before moving down to Portland, so it's nice to be back up here. I'm STV's leader for emerging transportation technology. And so I spent a lot of time talking about connected, autonomous, shared electric, all the new things that are happening in the transportation space. And I'm going to go a little bit off script and not just read the paragraph that describes our panel. I'll sort of paraphrase it, talk a little bit differently about the urban mobility transformation that we're undergoing right now. And really it's about disruption. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but what we're seeing is with new modes and new business models, electrification's been talked about a lot today. We haven't been talking as much about automation or connected and shared mobility, but all of that is working together as it converges to really disrupt the way that people get from here to there in the mobility space. And so disruption is kind of one of those phrases that when we read in Wired magazine or New York Times or whatever else is kind of a bit of a throwaway term to a certain degree. We think we understand what it means. We kind of understand that Airbnb disrupted the hotel industry and Uber disrupted the taxi industry. But when your industry gets disrupted, it really hits you more directly. And so we're in the early stages of that. We'll be talking about these modes. We're going to be talking about this disruption, and we'll be talking from the perspective of state DOT, local municipality, the Northwest National Laboratory, and our MPOs, and perspectives from each of those around this disruption. And so what I'm going to do first is ask each of our panelists, and just to keep things straight so I make sure that we give everybody fair time, I'm going to use alphabetical order here. But if you could each introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your agency and your role within the agency and how it fits into this conversation. Then we'll come back and I'll ask a question. I'll be the same format as we've been seeing the rest of the day, except one slight minor spin. When I ask one of you a question and you're wrapped it up, we'll also see if any of the rest of the panel wants to take that question as well. If any of the things that one of our other speakers mentioned sort of trigger something and you want to get a chance, don't feel compelled to do it. We don't want to have all 5 people talking each time. We'll get through 2 questions that way, but if there's really something that you want to weigh in on. So Celeste, can you go first and go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Wonderful to be with all of you this afternoon. My name is Celeste Gilman. I am the Strategic Policy Administrator in the Washington State Department of Transportation in our Active Transportation Division. And I've been with WashDOT for just about 7 years now in a variety of roles, including the Deputy Director of the Regional Transit Coordination Division, which is the team that works with Sound Transit and the other transit agencies in the Central Puget Sound, assisting with major transit expansion projects in and near WashDOT right away. I've been the Transportation Land Use Policy Advisor and now my current role. And prior to that, I led the transportation demand management programs at the University of Washington for almost a decade, which is a great example here in our state of a place where the sustainable choice is the easy choice, the common choice. 80% of trips to campus are not drive alone. And I currently have the honor at WashDOT of leading our implementation of a requirement that was passed as part of the Move Ahead Washington package to deliver complete streets when we are doing state transportation projects. If we're out there making a public investment of over $500,000 that we are, while we're there, that we're correcting the deficiencies in the walking and bicycling network. So the Washington State Department of Transportation, we are the State Department of Transportation here, and we're responsible for a large multi-modal infrastructure system from highways, trails, rail, Amtrak, the Washington State Ferries, which is our biggest transit agency, and that really creates the backbone for how we access everything that we need to access in our community. And we are a leading state DOT and really pushing forward the approach to take a more sustainable approach, that we have a vision for all Washington travelers to have access to a sustainable integrated multimodal transportation system.
Great, thank you, Celeste. Christine, can you go ahead and go next and introduce yourself?
Not on now. So I'm Christine Alar, and I am also with the DOT, but the Seattle Department of Transportation, so a little bit more local. And what I work on is definitely the expanding public transportation network and promoting active transportation part that is described in I think the sort of summary paragraph you were referring to. That's really the gist of what I do. We at the City of Seattle Department of Transportation, control the right-of-way, but we do not operate the transit that uses the street. So that's King County Metro. And a bulk of my job is coordinating the work that we do in the right-of-way with King County Metro to make sure that we implement transit priority infrastructure and all of the transit improvements that need to happen in the right-of-way. So I'm sort of the link between the two agencies. And pass it on.
Oh, that's all. Edward, can you go next, please?
Hi, I'm Edward Coviello with Kitsap Transit on the other side of the water. How many people know where Kitsap County is? Okay. How many people know where Bremerton is? Okay. Took the boat here this morning. Kitsap Transit operates 4 ferry routes with 10 vessels. We have about 30 fixed bus routes, and then 35 worker-driver buses, which bring workers to the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. They're basically like big van pools, and they also accept public up to the gates. And we were one of the first car-sharing organizations around. We operate something called the Scoot Car, and that basically is kind of like a zip car, but operated by the transit agency. And so we've got 3 or 4 places around the county that do that. In my role at Kitsap Transit, is to work on long-range plans, but also work on implementation of our long-range plans through access to transit, such as bus stop placement. I wish we had somebody like Christine in our local jurisdictions to help out. It's quite challenging. So, thanks.
All right, thank you. And Mike, can you go next?
Sure, glad to be here. My name is Mike Ulrich. I'm a principal transportation planner at the Spokane Regional Transportation Council. We serve the state function as a regional transportation planning organization and a federal function as a metropolitan planning organization. And I think most folks are probably aware, but in case you're not, MPOs, we don't build anything. We, in addition to administering funds, are really just there in our primary function to convene conversations, much like we're having here today. We have over 20 members who are member jurisdictions. WashDOT's represented on our policy board, City of Spokane, all of the municipalities in Spokane County. And again, we're really just convening these sorts of conversations about how to improve the transportation network. In my role, we're a small shop, so I've managed updates to our long-range plan. I mostly work in applied data, safety planning, really a jack of all trades given that we're such a small shop.
Okay, and Nawaf, can you go next?
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. My name is Nawaf Nazir. I'm a research scientist at PNNL. So Pacific Northwest National Lab is one of 17 Department of Energy labs which are spread all across the country. PNNL is located in Tri-Cities, Richland, Washington, right about a 3-hour drive from here. So PNNL, we work on a wide range of things ranging from nuclear energy to building sustainability, grid analytics, data analytics, transportation. So our main focus is, how can we make our energy systems more efficient, more resilient, but also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And since we are a Department of Energy lab, that's our main focus is to work on either DOE projects, DOT projects, and some other federal agencies. So we partner with industry, with academia, and also with local governments in bringing really research from academic side into practice. My role at the lab, my background is in applied math, but over time I've shifted over to project management. I lead several DOE and ARPA-E projects that are related to improving the efficiency of transportation systems, decarbonization of the transportation systems, and then how can we build the tools that we build, how can we take them to local governments and city governments which maybe do not have the expertise, technical expertise to do that on their own. So yeah, thank you.
And if you're paying attention in your book, notice that we originally had 6 panel members. We've had, with the beginning of school this year, one of our panel members took home a homework assignment. Unfortunately, it's studying the new strain of COVID from his children. So Sam from King County Metro is unable to join us today, which is a shame. Would love to have had that contribution as well. Especially our title of the panel, and I probably should have started with that, Urban Mobility, Rethinking the Future of Transportation. As you've already seen from the panel, we've got a diversity of perspectives from different agencies, and also probably a little bit of diversity of perspective of what urban means up here. And so we'll touch on that a little bit as we get into this. I'm going to ask a question first of the panel, and please feel free to spend as much or as little time on this as you want, because some of you, this doesn't affect quite as much maybe on your daily basis. But I've seen an emerging trend as a consultant on the way that our cities and the way that our public transit agencies have started to respond to this disruption that's happening within the industry. And I think early on there was a fair bit of maybe even fear to a certain degree of some of these new emerging business models and technologies as taking away riders. But there's also a huge opportunity with looking at first last mile delivery of services, which has long been a challenge, obviously, for transit. But there's also been this recognition that if transit is going to stay as relevant as possible and move as many people within our urban environments as possible, we need to focus on high-speed, highly reliable corridor service. And the transit agencies themselves can't do all of that. The municipal agencies themselves can't do all of that by themselves. And so what we're really starting to see a lot of is trends and partnerships between those that own, operate, maintain the roadway infrastructure and those that are delivering transit service. And so, again, feel free to spend as much or as little time on this particular topic, but Celeste will, again, maybe start with you and WashDOT. And this, every region calls it something a little bit different. Up here in Puget Sound, speed and reliability studies have been leading the charge. How has this been affecting your agency? How do you guys see it playing out? Any successes or challenges that you want to share?
I can give a very specific example. I led a multi-agency work group that collaborated working along the 145th corridor that is the dividing line between City of Seattle and the City of Shoreline. It is jurisdictionally complex because the dividing line runs through the center of the road. It's a WashDOT state highway. It's near a light rail station that will be opening up here shortly on the Linwood Link extension. It has a bus rapid transit route. And we brought all those perspectives together to look at improvements to serve that speed and reliability for transit, the inter-transit connections at the light rail station, and improve operations and safety at the interchange there at 145th and I-5. And through that collaboration, we were able to settle on a design for a roundabout that would provide a queue bypass for transit. And when looking at roundabouts, that's part of our required process because they offer so many benefits in terms of safety, reducing the number of conflict points, reducing speeds, reducing crash angles, and talking with the City of Shoreline, they'd originally had a different design, and they said, this operates better, it's safer, and it's cheaper. When do you get all three of those things? And we had this wonderful partnership with King County Metro, with Sound Transit. There's a video of a rodeo we did to lay out the design at a bus base, let operators drive it, get experience with it. So it was charting some new territory. Transit through roundabouts is on the growing edge, but it was a really great example of a partnership. Before I pass off the mic, I also want to introduce into that concept of speed and reliability a bit of reframing of travel time and consistency and positive experience, and that we have so much opportunity on the land use side by bringing destinations, adding housing, diversifying the places that people can reach within a shorter travel distance, and looking at that complete transportation system so that the door-to-door is a pleasant walk, is a pleasant bike share or scooter ride, and it's the whole combination of factors.
Yeah, I like that reframing because we have a tendency to focus on the how, and it's always very important to take that giant step backward, or maybe even start before you get into the how with why are we doing this in the first place. So I appreciate that reframing. Christine?
Sure. I think from the City of Seattle's perspective, it's really everything is seen through the lens of safety. And so reframing the speed and reliability as focusing more on the reliability and the efficiency and consistency, and sort of, yes, making sure it's efficient, but watching how we use the word speed when you're dealing with the public, because what we hear from a lot of our outreach is in neighborhoods and stuff, what they don't like is speeding traffic, speeding buses. And so when we go out and say, we're doing a speed and reliability study, so we've sort of changed it to be just like a reliability study or an efficiency study. So definitely, reframing is happening, I think, industry-wide. When I first started at the city, I've been there about, 16 years now. We did a whole corridor study throughout Seattle of different corridors. We had about 10 of them, and they were all the speed and reliability studies of the major transit corridors. And it was, ways to make it go faster, ways, and cutting down all of the stops and things. And it's just really, it's really changed, I think, in the industry. And what we want to do now is prioritize the sustainable modes of transport on these corridors. And so looking at how do we best serve all modes of transport in a very limited right-of-way. And that is the biggest challenge I think that we have now is we have a competition. Right-of-way in Seattle is pretty narrow for the most part. If anybody's driven around, you can probably attest to that. But, having a way to prioritize the uses of the right-of-way. And I was really struck by, in the previous presentation, the conversation about replacing aging infrastructure. While we're not necessarily replacing the aging infrastructure per se, it's aging in that it's not serving what we need it to serve now. It's not necessarily that we want to completely redo it, but it's aging infrastructure in that it's totally built for cars. And what we need to do is look at our infrastructure and modify them and update them to make room for all modes, the bikes, the micro-mobility services, the transit, designated right-of-ways and things like that. And cars, of course, because cars are not going to go away. So that's just an interesting perspective that we have, from the city.
Well, it is I mentioned disruption not necessarily just being a bad thing. And when our industry is getting disrupted, that's a reframing opportunity. And so we've historically built a lot of our infrastructure around the transportation technology, around the car, and then we've dealt with inequity issues ever since. We're trying to unwind a lot of that. So as we enter this brave new world and we have this opportunity to reframe, hey, let's look at what we actually want our city and our communities to be like, make the technology work for us instead of designing the infrastructure around the technology. So that's neat. And one of the problems with being early to the game of these speed and reliability studies is you learned speed maybe wasn't the word we should have opened with. Down in Portland, we call it enhanced transit service to do exactly the same kind of study, but it's just, Edward, how does this all play out in Kitsap?
Well, Kitsap's very different than Seattle. I would love to have big roads. I know you have small roads, but I would love to have some big roads. And we do have some corridors we're working on, trying to get in bus rapid transit style service. But I think our biggest challenge is we're really spread out in terms of the population density. And so bringing people to those corridors is our big challenge. We have a lot of infrastructure that are old roads that were built just prior to World War II. Much of Kitsap County grew during World War II in a mad rush to build ships for the war effort. And homes were just sort of slapped up, and infrastructure wasn't really thought about. And now we have that demand, not only for transit service, but also for active movement services, walking, wheeling, biking. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle to even get a bus stop put in. We have to go through a permitting process that can be challenging. So the way we address that is, my role at Kitsap Transit is to work closely with the cities and the tribes in the county to get through these processes. And it's slow going. But we're grinding along, and I really like what I heard from both of you about the corridor management and that kind of thing. So if there's any people who want to invest in property, come to Kitsap, SR 303. We've got a BRT plan there. We're trying to do the land use first, adjust that zoning code, and then that will induce the demand. So when they're putting me in my grave or into the furnace, wherever, it'll be a different place, I hope.
And so, Mike, you say that your agency doesn't own and operate either the infrastructure or transit, but you facilitate the conversation. So how is this playing out over there?
Yeah, hearing Celeste and Christine's comments made me think about the user experience. And Adrian, you mentioned in your remarks about this disruption, right? And when I think about disruption, I think, of course, about the micromobility services that are proliferating around in the last 10 years or so. And with the combination of all of those modes, micromobility, transit, as we've talked about, the user experience really comes to mind, and the level of stress that a particular user feels when they're trying to get from to a destination. And that level of stress could be different if you're biking or if you're walking. So one of the things SRTC is doing is studying that level of stress for users in our region. We commissioned recently a bike level of stress study. And so we're just trying to understand the problem really and understand that relationship between transit and between micromobility services and how that affects the user experience in the Spokane region.
And then Noah, if you do have a contribution in this one, that's fine. If not, I'll go ahead and ask you.
Maybe I can bring something from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Other folks here are from local city governments. From like a research institution perspective, I can maybe talk about innovation. So does anyone know what the latest cost estimate is for the new I-5 bridge? It's $7.5 billion. That's ridiculous. So we really need to innovate. We need to innovate and invest in high-risk, high-reward technologies, bring in new innovation in the transportation sector with transit, with public and private partnership, so that not only we can achieve our goals for greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability, but at the same time reducing the cost of building materials, reducing costs of putting in new roads, putting in new transit lines. So I think, and with AI/ML, how do we use recent advances in machine learning, in artificial intelligence, to really bring down costs and to achieve our goals in the most cost-effective manner. So that's something as a lab and as a Department of Energy is really investing heavily in, and we want to partner with both the private industry as well as our stakeholders in city and local governments to bring that to fruition.
Okay, great, thank you. Celeste, we'll come back to you. When we were talking and kind of getting ready for this panel, I used a phrase that's pretty interesting to me, so I hope you define it a little bit as part of your answer here. But how's your organization adapting to incorporate best available science to improve the safety and comfort of people walking, rolling, and biking?
Yes. So I borrowed that phrase of best available science from ecology. And I love it as a concept because it recognizes that our knowledge is always advancing and that we can't wait for it to get perfect. We need to use the best information that we have at this time and act on it, not perpetuating old models that we know are not generating the results that we want to get, and not waiting for some theoretical perfect knowledge that we'll never reach, but that it's always progressing. And it's such an exciting time to be in this industry and to be at the Washington State Department of Transportation, to be in Washington. We are a leading state here. And I was talking about level of traffic stress. So that is one of the metrics that we have now integrated into our business processes as part of that. We adopted level of traffic stress as part of our award-winning Washington State Active Transportation Plan. And then when we implemented our policies to put in effect the Complete Streets requirement, we codified that into our design directive. We have a goal of providing facilities for walking and biking of a level of traffic stress of 2 or better. And that correlates to a facility that is comfortable for most adults to use. Research has shown more than 50% of the population would like to walk or bicycle more if they felt safe doing so. A level of traffic stress 1 is a facility that's safe, comfortable, accessible to all ages and abilities. So we have an update to our design manual that'll be coming out sort of any day now, very soon this fall. And that is, I have the next level. So sort of this incremental, continuous improvement, as we learn and apply and then propagate that through our standards and our business processes. We also are another metric from our active transportation plan that we're working on. I have a similar process is the Route Directness Index, which recognizes that people are like water. They want to follow the most direct path. And that the Route Directness Index is the ratio between the most direct path and the path that's actually feasible given the infrastructure. And a way to measure and keep track of how much out of direction travel, what's the penalty that we're imposing on people who are operating under their own power. So those are a couple examples, and there's just so much new that's coming out. I just saw an FHWA is really taking leadership role in the safe systems approach. There's guidance on integrating the safe systems. I just saw a webinar on it earlier today. It'll be published this fall. A new report on crash modification factors for separated bicycle facilities. So just that kind of watching what's the latest, being part of what's the latest, and then bringing it into practice.
I like this best available science approach to it. It sounds like a good way of dealing with this disruption that we're going through, because we can't wait for all the dust to settle to then make decisions. We have to continue to move forward while everything's changing around us.
Yeah, Adrian, I just wanted to build on the point that Celeste made around best available science, and especially in the realm of safety. And we've been looking into this a lot, especially in our region. And one of the things we found that's probably not unique to us is that historical data, at least historical crash data, is not an accurate predictor of future crashes. And so we have to rethink that paradigm that we've historically relied on about how to plan for a safer system. And historically, that's looked like finding where the most crashes are and designing some solution to fix those crashes. Well, when you account for human behavior, you can't always, of course, design yourself out of those, most of those crashes. So we have to rely on other approaches, like Nawaf brought up, the idea of machine learning and understanding where there are, for example, near misses in intersections, to start predicting where these crashes will happen in the future, instead of just, again, leaning on the historical data to guide our investment.
Yeah, it sure seems like it's going to be difficult to achieve anything close to Vision Zero if we have to wait for people to die, aggregate that data for a few years to find the hot spots to go put a solution out there, and then wait another 3 to 5 years to find out if people are still dying, or did we just move the problem upstream or downstream? We have to change that paradigm. So, all right, we've got like 12 minutes left and about an hour's worth of questions here. So we'll, Christine, you're currently working on freight and bus lane pilot projects with SDOT and transit lane policy, giving you some guidance and prioritizing right away. What can you share with that?
Sure. I'll just run through. As I mentioned, my focus is on transit, but a lot of the projects that we've had moving forward do address the challenges of balancing all the needs of modes in the right-of-way. And over the last, I would say, 10 years or so at the City of Seattle, we've developed like the Bike Master Plan, which lays out a network of bike lanes that they would like to see in the city. And PED master plans, pedestrian master plans, looking at intersections that need to be upgraded with better signals or better crosswalks. We've also had in the past the transit master plan, looking at long-term goals for bus lanes and things like that. And right now we are working, to kind of starting to get towards the end of the Seattle Transportation Plan, which looks at all of the city right-of-ways and gives some guidance on how to prioritize the right-of-way. Where do you give transit priority over bikes, for instance, or where does bikes needs to be necessary in a certain corridor to connect to the rest of the system. So that's been, I think, a really interesting process and changing how we do work. And one of the other elements is this freight and bus lane plan is being developed, and that's this kind of idea that we really do need to keep freight in the consciousness because we're not getting a lot of goods in the city if we don't have freight to deliver them. And so how can we work with the freight community and transit and maybe use some of our designated right-of-way that we use for transit and have freight use it? It's also got a great acronym, the FAB lanes, like who doesn't love a FAB lane? And also working on a transit performance policy and a bus lane use policy. Again, that's, sitting with me in the transit world. But, this is just an opportunity to look at, really putting it at the forefront of our minds when we're looking at repaving streets, when we're looking at managing the right-of-way, and evaluating the metrics that we've used, not just sticking with traffic throughput, for volumes of traffic, but looking at passenger throughput. If you're looking at how many vehicles come through an hour, it's like, well, that's great, but how many people can we move? If those were buses instead of just single occupancy cars. So really just sort of adjusting the thinking and developing policies to use as a guidance along that way.
So Edward, you kind of tipped us a little bit on this, I think, with the first answer, and on you're dealing with a different set of issues, some common issues in some of your more dense and urban areas, but you've got a big, in many cases, rural county that you're dealing with, and now I understand what you meant by sometimes I wish I had those wider roads right away to be dealing with some of these issues, because the engineering standards are calling for complete street retrofits, and but the financial impacts when you're dealing with what you're dealing with in a lot of this don't make that so feasible in a lot of cases. So how's this preventing access to transit in a growing region with such diverse geography, and how are you guys handling it?
I think more or less it's slowing access to transit down. When we just went through a couple of route changes actually this week. Our bid, as we call it in transit, changed a couple routes, and we're having to operate the bus using flag stops until we get this permitting issue done. And we're an agency, we've got about 400 people at Kitsap Transit, but we don't have a single engineer on staff. We have on-call engineers, that kind of thing, but we're mostly an operating agency. So for us to sit down and actually budget out how much it's going to cost to make all these stops meet the modern engineering standards, I don't know where to begin on that. And I think a lot of smaller agencies outside the big cities are probably struggling with this. And that's a lot of the population of the region. It's a lot of, if you want to go back to greenhouse gases, it's a lot of the greenhouse gases that the major urban cores, you have options to get around. So the bus really is kind of a lifeline for people. I know in Kitsap it's a lifeline for that naval shipyard. It requires transit to function. Something like 20 to 30% of the workforce takes transit. Without it, it doesn't function. So it's still important, but it's that physical geography is such a tough nut to crack. It's why I came up to Kitsap from where I was. And now, of course, I'm complaining about it.
Yeah,
but,
right.
It's the challenge. And I guess one of the challenge before I let go here is at next year's Infra Day, I don't know if there's any city or urban planners in the audience here. Are there any city or urban planners? We got a couple. Okay. Yeah. I think we need more of those, because I think there's a gap there. So.
Okay, well, let's see. We're going to have to go rapid fire on these last couple of questions. Mike, most jurisdictions rely heavily on federal funds to implement transportation projects. The Those funds are limited, highly competitive, and while the Jobs Act has been great with making a lot more funding available, they still largely tend to fund traditional transportation investments. So how can transportation practitioners better promote the need for more innovative, technology-based solutions, which is kind of what we're talking about here as well?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we have to recognize is that the project prioritization process is inherently political. I mentioned that part of what we do at SRTC is convene conversations. One of those conversations that becomes relatively contentious, at least when federal money is involved, is around project prioritization and who's going to get the limited resources. I think we have an obligation as practitioners to help our decision makers understand the future that they're trying to build. It's really easy and understandable if you're a decision maker to be hyper-focused on the near term, on what you're investing in 5, 10 years. One of the things we try to do at our agency is help our decision makers understand that long term, the 20 years, the 25 years, and what that future is going to look like in 25 years. And the intention of examining a particular future or several futures, possible futures, is not to pick a project that is perfect, but is instead to look at all of the available investments that we could make and compare them to all of the possible futures that could exist. And the idea there, of course, is that the projects that hold up the best against the most expected futures are those that are the most worthwhile investments. So again, I think the obligation for us as practitioners is to help our decision makers understand what they're trying to build, and so we can make those, again, limited resources as efficient as possible.
All right. Well, I could ask about 5 follow-up questions on that one alone. Why don't we close out now off with you and make sure that that our panel knows and that all the other municipalities and transit agencies and other folks represented here, how do they tap into what PNNL can bring, leveraging your technical expertise, AI, machine learning, and everything that you've been talking about? How do we partner with you?
Yeah, so we are a Department of Energy lab, and we work on grant funding opportunities. So we partner with industry, with academia, and local state governments, utilities on projects where we want to bring in innovation, we want to bring in new ideas. And these are, ideas or innovations which the private sector may not fund. So we take on, high risk, high reward projects. So we're always looking for partners from local governments who, maybe do not have the technical expertise on their staff, but they have a pressing need or they have some new ideas, and they want to, target some federal funding so that they can either do pilot projects or see how this new technology is going to play out. So the best way would be, to keep an eye out for federal funding. And if you find something that is of interest to you, reach out to someone at the lab. If you have some ideas, you can reach out to folks from PNNL. There's me, Jennifer also, who had a panel earlier. Reach out to us if you have some innovative ideas that you would like to partner with us. And we have expertise on many different areas, as Adrian mentioned, related to AI, related to ML, modeling different types of systems, transportation systems, energy systems, looking at the nexus between different types of systems, really doing different kinds of studies, planning, so we can really help out with a lot of this stuff. As an example, recently we got a funding from ARPA-E to look into freight decarbonization. So this is an industry which is very hard to decarbonize. You have medium, heavy-duty vehicles, you have ships, you have trains. So nobody in the private industry is going to try to look into decarbonization of this sector. But that is something, it's a challenge that we want to look into. So we're looking into new fuels that can have lower greenhouse gas emissions. We're looking into battery electric. We're looking into fuel cells, hydrogen, all these different new kind of technologies that we can, that we can use to decarbonize these, difficult and heavy industries, but at the same time trying to bring in innovation to keep costs down. So we bring in a lot of expertise in, like Adrian mentioned, on artificial intelligence that can really bring down costs in these areas. Another example is we're doing a project with Coral Gables in Florida where we are trying to automate their traffic management systems. So because of the increased number of sensors and connected and automated vehicles and phone connectivity, you have all of this data that is coming in from drivers, from vehicles, and from the traffic signals and all this traffic infrastructure. And we're collecting all of this data, analyzing it in real time, developing digital twins of the system, which later on the cities can study to plan ahead. If they want to set up new infrastructure, they can run simulations on these digital twins. So that's how we're really bringing in innovation, which can then, we can replicate this all across the country. So when we run a pilot project, it's not just for that particular community. We're looking into expanding and replicating that all across the country. So yeah, in short, if you have ideas, reach out to us. We're always interested in working with local communities.
So I think there was a joke earlier today about the Oscar music coming on and telling us it's time to get off the stage. I think I hear it coming on. I want to give a hand to the panel here. I wish we had another hour with them. So.